It has been over 100 years since Titanic sank. I've tried comprehending that during those 100 years, all of her 712 survivors have passed away, dozens of ships larger than Titanic have been launched, and some sunk, millions of lives have been lost at sea due to warfare, we've watched explorers walk on the moon, we've welcomed a new millennium, witnessed influential men and women taken from us in the prime of their lives, and seen both acts of evil and some of the most inspiring traits humanity has to offer. But during those 100 years, Titanic's story has prevailed. The events of that cold April morning are forever studied, remembered, used as a reference point, sometimes as a litmus test, often as a metaphor. I've struggled to find one common denominator. Why Titanic hasn't waned in, dare I call it, popularity, while other shipwrecks and infamous disasters and topics have over decades during an ever-changing human landscape. What draws our attention to her? What makes Titanic famous continually throughout time and culture across the globe? As famous as the names Coca-Cola and Jesus Christ. To first wrap my head around this, I need to arrange some deck chairs. I decided to look into some of the quote Titanic popularity waves which fascinated humanity. She wasn't always the most infamous ship. Before she set sail, her older sister ship Olympic perhaps held that title due to being a technological triumph in Marvel. Ocean liners and steamships of these large sizes were well known, and they were a symbol of national pride. The closest equivalent we could have today is comparing the Olympic-class liners to the Saturn rockets or space shuttles. They were definitely impressive enough to gather attention, but after the first one they were all considered the same, unless something significant occurred to one of them. Modern-day cruise ships are a dime a dozen. I'll certainly get flack for saying that, but this is perhaps why Queen Mary II stands out so much. Titanic was, to the average 1912 Joe, just another Olympic. Her attention brought enough press to gain a story, but no front-page headlines. Those were to come after April 14th. Indeed, the sinking is when the press couldn't get enough of her. Captain Rostron had to practically arrest one reporter who found his way aboard Carpathia as she was entering New York Harbor. Newspaper reporters flooded the west side piers as the rescue ship docked, waving handfuls of bills offering good money for a good story to Titanic survivors and crewmen of the Cunarder. Moviegoers of the world didn't need to wait too long. Young Dorothy Gibson, already a star of the silent screen, found herself with a new credit on her resume: survivor of the Titanic disaster. Her lover, turned fiancé once she arrived in New York, arranged a dramatic film adaptation of her survival from the doomed liner. Filmed and ready for theaters by May 16th of the same year, just over a month after the ship went down. Besides starring in the film, Miss Gibson would help with the screenplay, adding a fictional plot to her real-life character. Her movie alter ego was traveling on Titanic to America to marry her sweetheart. This film has been lost to history. Gibson stated, "The nation and the world has been profoundly grieved by the sinking of the Titanic, and I had the opportunity to pay tribute to those who gave their lives that awful night. That is all I tried to do." Two more silent films, from France and the other in Germany, were released also in late 1912. The 20s also saw Titanic being used as a backdrop for a story told on the silver screen, all highly fictionalized as well. It might seem almost incredible to the modern observer that so soon after the disaster, even before a year had passed, that motion pictures were being produced about Titanic. Perhaps today these might be considered in ill taste, especially if they were used to portray any underlying message or themes, which Titanic was a stage for by the 1940s. The Nazi propaganda minister produced an expensive motion picture about Titanic during World War II. An anti-British propaganda film, it villainized the White Star Line, capitalism, all for their greed, while locking German immigrants down in third class as the ship sank. A surreal image when one remembers what was happening at the time in Nazi concentration camps. The rebuilding of destroyed cities due to two global wars, which cost the lives of millions, and the horrifying plans by Hitler to wipe out a race of people were understandably much more important to an exhausted humanity than a 33-year-old shipwreck by the end of the 1940s. However, Titanic's second wave came about when the world was entering a new age, an age of rebirth and an age of fear. Fear that at any moment, a technological and scientific achievement could destroy all life on the planet. The world was entering a Cold War. Hollywood produced its first blockbuster about Titanic in 1953, originally to be named Nearer My God to Thee. It took the title Titanic, starring Barbara Stanwyck and Clifton Webb, who sailed on Olympic many years earlier with his mother. It told the story of a fictional family drama which took place aboard the maiden voyage. Survivors of the disaster were invited to the premiere of the film. Sometimes considered an over-the-top melodrama, it won the 1953 Academy Award for Best Screenplay, but it brought Titanic back into the limelight in the minds of the public. Hard at work to help with the growing demand for Titanic was a fellow passenger of Olympic, who too sailed aboard her with his mother. Walter Lord published a book after interviewing and writing correspondence with over 60 Titanic survivors. He would name it A Night to Remember, and it was a bestseller, probably helped due to the popularity of Titanic 2 years earlier. It would find serialization in the magazine Ladies' Home Journal in 1955, and eventually its way to both television and the big screen in 1958, when it was filmed at Pinewood Studios in England. The rights to the film were bought by producer William McQuitty. McQuitty grew up in Belfast and had memories of both Olympic and Titanic being built as a young boy. Unlike every film before it, thanks to its source material, A Night to Remember was focused on getting the facts correct about the disaster. Sets were constructed resembling the liner. Survivors were brought on board as advisors. Lawrence Beasley and Edith Russell, two of some of the most vocal survivors of the Titanic disaster, were on set during the filming. So much could be said about A Night to Remember that it deserves its own discussion. It helped to sustain the world's thirst for the lost mystery ship well into the 80s. Footage from the movie was colorized and used again and again in other films and serials. But one dream still lived in the hearts and minds of many who were fascinated by Titanic: locating and perhaps recovering the lost wreck. The dream was first realized when Clive Cussler's novel was raised to the big screen in 1980, although it was joked how the movie was so expensive it would have been cheaper to lower the Atlantic. The wreck being discovered in 1985 brought on swell after swell of documentaries and specials, exhibits and books. Her few remaining survivors became superstars once again. It seemed that the sky had been reached for Titanic and there was nowhere else to go for this ship as the world absorbed all they could about her. Now we're entering a new age just like Titanic was entering. An age where we can connect instantly to one another, and it seems if not weekly, there is at least a news story or report about Titanic monthly regarding the wreck, the film, or some new mission to rebuild her. Now, I have personally struggled to figure out why we have this collective continued obsession with Titanic. I have even struggled to figure it out within myself. To each person, it seems to be different. Attempting to find an answer to this question, I decided to ask all of you, our students. It seems fitting. You are here for Titanic, so you are just as interested in her story as I am. So like any good teacher, I'm going to read back a couple of the answers from the homework assignment. When going through these, I often found myself stopping to reflect, and I hope you do too. Perhaps the best way to understand why Titanic is so fascinating and why she will never die is to continually ask these questions and hear what others say in response. For me, she is still fascinating because she is like a modern Bible story, a moral cautionary tale about man's hubris against nature. She is also a microcosm of society, that she sadly reflects our society today. For me, my greatest takeaway from Titanic is no matter how rich or poor you are, in the face of morality, we are all just the same. That movie, yo. It was the moment the world changed forever, the death of an age of unheard of wealth and opulence, the boundless confidence in technology and human innovation. It was the last time we were absolutely sure about anything. Maybe because there is so much to answer about her. It's the legend, so many stories surrounding her, and the fact that it has been 108 years and we still don't exactly know what happened. It relatively fully encapsulates the end of an age of presumed invincibility. I'm 35 and have known about Titanic since I was 8. There is just something about this ship. I can rewatch the same documentaries over and over again and never tire or bore of it. Something about Titanic just grabs me. Just look at them lines and you'll understand. Also, her interiors were magnifique. Because she's a myth, and one of the most tragic events that's happened. And also because of Cameron. Because even though it happened, it's still unbelievable. It was told that God himself could not sink her, and she rolled the odds and sank. James Cameron. Everything that night aligned perfectly and gave us so much stories to tell and investigate. She struggled and gave hope to people aboard for nearly 3 hours. But in the end, all that hard work spent on her construction and interior fittings ended up at the bottom of the ocean torn in pieces. Such a shame. Because she is a legend. The series of extraordinary happenings before the collision, the perfect weather, the largest man-made moving object, the rarest chances of collision, the doom, the next 2 hours 40 minutes which showed every conceivable human emotions, end of caste distinction, loss of 1,496 souls, and the list goes on. For so many different reasons that I can't quite put into words, though I'll try. From the stories that came out of that tragic night, like the band playing till the end, Ida and Isidore Strauss, etc., to the ship itself and the beauty of all that hard work that went into building her, to the fact that the conditions on that night of the sinking were so rare and created that perfect storm for the disaster. I could probably go on, but I'll be here all day. Because it was the death of a dream. We all dream, have hopes of bettering ourselves and our families. Aboard Titanic, we were the hopes and dreams of the world at the time. From the designers and builders with dreams of building the best, the rich who were in awe of the sheer size and luxury appointments, to the immigrants who packed up everything, left their homes and families to build a better life, and each class, though separated by time, were brought together on that frozen deck. They said goodbye to loved ones together, they cried together. And those who remained, each class, died together. This very scenario touches every ear that hears, and every heart that feels. It is a shared sorrow by the world. And it changed the world when words skipped over the wires like a flat stone on a mill pond. The ripples caused us all to go numb from the tragic loss of life. We at times as a people feel invincible, that we can do anything. But history has a way of waking us up. And in that time, at that era, we all had the death of a dream. I want to hear more of your reasons why you can't forget Titanic. You clearly couldn't. You watched this video and you were interested enough in a Titanic University or a Titanic video game or a Titanic Patreon. To each of you, because you were all diverse and different, Titanic means something unique as well, and I would love to hear it. A survivor of Titanic said perhaps one of the most poignant and everlasting messages about Titanic, which proved to all be too true.
There was a peace, and the world had an even tenor to its way. It seems to me that the disaster about to occur was the event that not only made the world rub its eyes and awake, but wake it with a start. To my mind, the world of today awoke April 15th, 1912. Jack there, first class passenger.